Montana Territory, August 1871. The sky was wide and blistering blue when the preacher's wife pointed straight at her and screamed, "She carries the devil's mark." Avenlee Darnell stood barefoot in the dust outside the general store in Saddle Creek, her worn dress clinging to her thin frame from the heat. Her long hair stuck to her neck. The red swath of skin curling from her jaw to her collarbone had always been part of her, a birthmark, but in this town it meant something wicked. Avenlee didn't cry. She just picked up the sack of flour she had paid for and walked away, slow and quiet like she always did. She was 22 and alone. Her mother had died birthing her. Her father, gone before she turned 8. The Darnell name did not carry weight in Saddle Creek, only whispers and warnings. She made her living mending clothes and tending to the old man who ran the livery, sleeping in a loft above the barn. She kept to herself, always with her braid over the left shoulder to cover the mark. But folks still looked, still whispered. None of it surprised her. What surprised her was the man on the horse. It was just past sundown when he rode into town, dust clinging to his coat, his horse lathered and tired. He had a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, a rifle slung across his back, and a steady way about him, like nothing in the world could shake him. He dismounted with care, patting the horse's neck. Avenlee was sweeping the porch of the livery when their eyes met. She froze. He did not look away. Instead, the man gave a small nod and said, "Evening." She blinked. "Evening." And then he walked inside. His name, she would learn the next day, was Yates Finley, a cowboy from Wyoming, driving 24 head of cattle south for a man in Billings. He was 28, quiet, clean with his words, and respectful. He stayed in the bunkhouse behind the saloon but kept his horse at the livery. For 3 days, he brought the horse in himself and waited while she checked its shoes or brushed down its coat. He never asked about her face, never stared, never flinched. On the 4th morning, she found him repairing a broken stirrup strap in the barn. "You do leather work?" she asked. He looked up and smiled just a little. "When I need to." She stepped closer. "You missed a stitch." He held it out to her. "You fix it," she nodded, and they sat side by side on the bench in the barn, the late sun streaking gold through the high windows. Their hands brushed once. Neither pulled away. That night, the preacher's wife came back. Avenlee was walking home with a basket of eggs from the widow Renshaw when the woman stepped in her path. "Do not think that man rides for you," she hissed. "You are cursed, always have been." Avenlee did not answer. She walked around her and kept going, but inside, something cracked. She had lived with the stairs all her life, but now they cut deeper because someone had looked at her like she was not a curse. She did not see Yates the next day. The cattle were being moved. He rode out at dawn, and the barn felt hollow without his quiet presence. That night the storm came, thunder rolled through the prairie. The wind screamed. The barn creaked and groaned as Avenlee lay awake in the loft, wrapped in a quilt. Then a sound. Faint but urgent, a knock. She climbed down the ladder, lantern in hand, and opened the big side door. A girl stood there, soaked to the bone, shivering hard, no older than 5. Behind her a boy, maybe 7, holding her hand with fierce protectiveness. They were alone. "We got lost," the boy said. "Mama left us in the wagon 2 days ago. She never came back." Avonlee's chest ached. She pulled them inside without hesitation, dried them, fed them bread and jam, and made a bed for them in the hay with every blanket she had. The next morning she walked them to the sheriff's office. But the sheriff was gone, out chasing a thief. No one else stepped forward. No one wanted 2 abandoned children with no name but Jacob and Juna. So Avenlee took them back with her by evening. She had made them clothes from what she had and taught them how to brush the horses. She had not laughed in months, but when Juna offered her a dandelion with both hands and a solemn face, she laughed until tears ran down her cheeks. That was when Yates came back. He stepped into the barn doorway, saw her sitting in the hay with the children curled beside her, and stopped. "I got here as fast as I could," he said. "Heard there was trouble." "They were abandoned," she said, voice low. "I am taking care of them." He looked at her, long and careful. "You always take in the broken," she swallowed. "Someone has to." He walked to her then and crouched, his knees brushing hers. The children were asleep. The lantern light flickered over his face. I knew a man once, he said, who thought scars were proof you survived, not shame, just proof. She met his eyes. I do not think you are cursed, Avenlee, he said. I think you are the strongest woman I have met. Her breath caught. He reached out slow and touched her jaw where the mark lay, just a touch, gentle, reverent. No one had ever touched her like that. I do not care what they say, he added. You are a blessing, and I am staying. She did not speak, but her eyes filled, and she nodded once, just once, and he stayed. The first frost came early that year. Not heavy, but enough to silver the grass along the creek's edge and make the boards of the barn groan beneath Avonlee's boots. She rose before the sun, as she always had, but now there were small socks to mend and porridge to stir. Jacob helped without being asked, quiet and watchful. Juna, still prone to sudden tears in her sleep, clung to Avonlee's skirts until her little hands found something to busy themselves with. Yates brought chopped wood each morning, stacking it without being told, his sleeves rolled to the elbow. He didn't ask to stay in the barn, he simply slept in the tack room with a blanket and his saddle for a pillow. No one told him to go, and he never said how long he planned to remain. He just stayed. One evening after supper, Avenlee sat on the barn stoop stringing beans for drying. Yates leaned against the doorframe behind her, arms crossed loosely. You ever think about going someplace else? He asked. She didn't turn. Where would I go? Someplace where nobody spits when you walk past, he said. Where you could raise those two without watching your back every time you step into town. She slid a string of beans onto the line. I know how to keep my back straight. This land knows me. I know it. He walked down the steps and crouched beside her. I've seen places where the soil's dark and soft and water's not such a fight to find. You could have chickens, a garden. She looked at him then. You offering me dirt and chickens, I'm offering quiet. And a fence nobody crosses unless invited. She studied his face. You running from something, Finley? He shook his head. I've already run, now I'm looking to stay put. Jacob's voice called from inside the barn, asking about a missing button. Avenlee stood slowly, brushing her hands on her apron. Then maybe you should start by fixing that boy's shirt, she said. She left him there with the beans, but when she returned later, they were all strung and hung to dry. A week passed. Then another. Word reached Saddle Creek that the children's mother had been found dead by a creek west of town. No name, no kin. The sheriff stopped by the barn that afternoon with the news, said it quiet, tipped his hat, and left without asking what Avenlee planned to do. Yates was brushing down his horse when she approached him behind the barn. They're mine now, she said. No one's going to come for them. He didn't ask if she was sure. He didn't need to. You'll need more shelter, he said. She nodded. And a second bed. They didn't speak of it again, but the next morning he started clearing the patch of land beside the barn, hauled stone from the creek, found scrap timber behind the mill. Jacob helped carry nails in a tin pail while Juna gathered wildflowers and tucked them into the cracks of the half-finished walls. Avenlee sewed curtains with her own hands, her stitches precise and even. By the time the first snow fell, the cabin stood firm beneath the cottonwoods. Avenlee moved into it with the children. Yates stayed in the barn, but every evening he came to the cabin door with a tin pot of something hot and filling. One night, as the wind howled low across the plains, he lingered at the threshold after supper. The firelight caught the edge of the red birthmark along her neck as she leaned over Juna to tuck in a wool blanket. Yates didn't look away. You never asked what I was before this, he said. She turned slowly. I figured if you wanted to tell me you would. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I was a bounty tracker, rode border trails from Fort Laramie down to Santa Fe, brought in men who didn't want to be found. She waited. I did things I'm not proud of, he said. Took coin for it. Thought it was justice. Some of it was, not all. She crossed to the hearth and stirred the coals. You think I scare easy? No, he said. That's why I'm telling you. She looked at him then, the fire painting shadows across her face. You're not the only one with ghosts. He lowered himself onto the bench near the fire. I don't want to be a ghost anymore. Juna stirred in her sleep. Avenlee knelt and brushed the hair from the girl's brow, then turned back to him. You're not, she said. For the first time since he'd come to Saddle Creek, he smiled full and slow, and it softened the lines around his eyes. "I'll build you a fence," he said. "You already did," she whispered. And neither reached for the other, but the space between them warmed like spring thaw, slow, sure, and unstoppable. By the time the creek iced over, the cabin's walls no longer echoed. The children's boots left tracks across the packed dirt floor, and the hearth stayed warm from dawn to dusk. Avenlee had traded 36 hand-stitched buttons for a second-hand stove, and Yates hauled it from the trading post on a borrowed sled, his gloves stiff with cold and his breath curling into the air like smoke. They rarely spoke of the past. That suited both of them. One morning, while the light was still pale and the trees heavy with frost, Avenlee found Yates sitting outside with a worn ledger open on his knee. He didn't notice her at first, his pencil paused above a column of names. "You taking count of something?" she asked, rubbing her hands together. "Just trying to remember," he said, not looking up. "The ranch I worked before this small outfit west of Rawlins, the man who ran it taught me to keep records, said if you don't write a thing down, it'll vanish. Some things are better lost," she said. He gave a slow nod. "Others need facing," she stepped closer. "What are you trying to face?" He closed the ledger and looked at her. "I left behind a debt, not money, a promise." She waited, arms folded against the cold. "There was a boy," he went on, "son of a man I brought in, didn't know till afterward. I was young, thought the job ended when the cuffs closed. Did he come after you?" "No," his voice was quiet. "He just watched me ride away." Avenlee looked toward the barn. "You think riding farther will fix that?" "No," he said. "But building something honest might." Inside the cabin, Jacob called out, worried about the fire. She gave Yates a last glance and went in without answering. That night, after the children were asleep, she found him smoothing a patchwork saddle blanket beside the fire. She crouched beside him and picked up the edge. "You planning to leave again?" Her voice was low. He didn't look over. "Was thinking about staying longer." She ran her thumb along the hand-stitched seam. "You already stayed longer than most." "I'd stay for good," he said, "but I'd need to know I wasn't just a guest." She didn't speak right away. The fire hissed softly behind them. "I haven't had anything that lasted," she said. "Not since I was a girl." "I'm not asking for a promise you can't carry," he said, "just one you want to." She turned to him, her face unreadable in the dim light. "You'd take on a woman with 2 children that aren't hers by blood. I'd take on a woman who mends what's broken and doesn't flinch from the truth." She stood then, brushing her hands on her skirt. "Come inside tomorrow, stay for supper." He looked up. "I thought I already did." She shook her head. "Not as a helper, not as a boarder, as a man who belongs here." The next day he shaved, cut his hair, and wore a clean shirt. He brought a bundle wrapped in cloth, 2 hand-whittled spoons, and a carved horse small enough for Juna's palm. Jacob eyed him for a long time before handing him a slate scrawled with crooked letters. "You know how to read maps?" the boy asked. "Some," Yates said. "Then you can help me find where we are." Avenlee watched from across the table, her hands still in the dough she was rolling. That night they all sat at the same side of the hearth, the children leaning against his legs. She didn't reach for his hand. She didn't have to. In the days that followed, he began cutting logs after breakfast, speaking with the widow downriver about trading salt pork for lumber. Avenlee let him, not because she needed permission, but because it no longer felt like she had something to prove. One afternoon, she found him kneeling by the creek, smoothing flat stones beneath the water. "You building something?" she asked, stepping down the embankment. He didn't look up. "A marker." "For who?" He placed the stone and stood. "For the boy's father. I don't even know the man's name, but I figured I'd put it here anyway. Might be the only place I ever got clean." She stood beside him, the wind lifting her braid. "You're not the only one trying to start fresh," he turned to her. "Then maybe we can do it side by side," she nodded. "That sounds about right." He reached for her hand, and this time she let him. No one watched, no one whispered. Only the sound of water moving beneath the ice and 2 people choosing each other not to escape what had been, but to build what could be. Late March brought thaw, not warmth. The land was still hard underfoot, but the snow had thinned and the creek ran faster. Mornings smelled of wet bark and cold earth. Avenlee kept quilts off the line to avoid the damp, and Yates began shaping fence posts from a stand of deadfall just beyond the rise. Jacob carried a hatchet half his size and followed in silence, watching each notch carved into the pine. Inside, Juna traced letters into the ash on the hearthstones, tongue caught between her teeth. Avenlee watched from the table, her mending forgotten in her lap. "I want to write my own name," Juna said. "You will," Avenlee answered. "Soon." "I want to keep it," the girl added without looking up. Avenlee rose and knelt beside her. "It's yours." "No one gave it to me," Juna whispered. "I just had it." Avenlee brushed a strand of hair from the girl's cheek. "Then it came from you. That's stronger than being given." Juna nodded once and pressed her palm over the letters. She didn't speak again that day. By the end of the week, the posts were set in a wide arc behind the cabin. Yates worked dusk to dusk, arms aching, boots soaked. He didn't say it, but Avenlee knew what it meant, a place held by boundary, not to keep people in, but to keep cruelty out. That Sunday, the preacher from Saddle Creek rode out unannounced. His coat was stiff with dust and his collar wilted. He stood at the fence, hat in hand, and called out once. Yates stepped from the barn, wiping his palms on his trousers. Avenlee appeared in the doorway, her face unreadable. "I came to speak peaceably," the preacher said. Yates didn't move. "You lost that right the day you let your wife spit fire at a girl who never wronged her." The preacher's eyes dropped. "She's gone, back east to her sisters. I didn't stop her." "That doesn't make you righteous," Avenlee said. "No," the preacher replied, "but it might make me less blind than I was." Juna peered out from behind Avenlee's skirts. The preacher glanced at her, then back to Yates. "I buried a man last week who died in his sleep, alone. No one came for him. No one even knew his name." "What's that to us?" Yates asked. "I saw the fence," the preacher said. "It's straight, solid. You're building something that won't fall." "We are," Avenlee replied. The preacher nodded once. "Then I'll not trouble you again." He turned and rode off. His horse left no prints in the softening ground. That night, Avenlee sat beside Yates on the low bench near the door. The cabin was quiet. Jacob had fallen asleep with a book over his chest, and Juna curled beside him like a kitten. "You believe him?" Yates asked. "No," she said. "But I believe he's afraid." "Of what?" "Of dying without ever being known." Yates turned to her then. "You ever think about what your life might have been if things were different?" "No," she said. "I think about what it is now." He reached into his coat and pulled something wrapped in a scrap of blue cotton. He held it out. She opened it slowly. Inside lay a simple ring, shaped from bone, smoothed and sanded to a pale gleam. "I carved it from the first fence post," he said. "If you don't want it, I'll bury it under the porch." She held it in her palm, then looked up at him. "You didn't ask a question." "I figured if you wanted it, you'd answer without words." She slid it onto her finger. It fit. He exhaled, slow and steady, and said nothing more. Outside, the wind had changed. It came from the west now, carrying the scent of thawing sage and open grass. In the morning, they began clearing the ground for a garden. Jacob marked out rows with twine. Juna carried handfuls of ash to scatter beneath the soil. Avenlee turned the earth with her bare hands, and Yates dug alongside, sleeves rolled and boots caked in mud. No one told them what to do. No one had to. They already knew. Spring deepened slow and muddy. The days lengthened, and wild iris bloomed in pale clusters along the creek bank. Avenlee planted onions and turnips in the back garden, kneeling in her patched skirt as Juna laid seeds in careful rows. Jacob turned compost with a stick, his brow furrowed like a man twice his age. Yates kept close to the tree line, chopping logs for a woodshed he was building board by board, the roof still waiting for shingles. One afternoon, a wagon appeared on the horizon, paint faded, axles groaning, canvas patched in 3 different places. The man driving it was thin and windburned, his beard gone half gray. He pulled up short near the fence and tipped his hat. Avenlee stood from the rows and wiped her hands on a cloth. "Name's Dillard. I was told there's horses kept here." "I got one needs tending." Yates stepped from behind the shed, sleeves rolled, axe still in hand. "What's wrong with it?" Favoring the back left, "Been limping since last frost, won't take a shoe." Yates glanced at Avenlee. She nodded once and called for Jacob to fetch water. The horse was a dun mare, raw-boned and nervous, her flank marked with an old brand. Avenlee approached slow, murmuring as she eased her hand along the haunch. The leg was swollen tight just above the hoof. "She needs rest, not a road," Avenlee said. Dillard scratched his neck. "I was headed north, thought to trade her if I couldn't ride her." "She won't fetch much limping like that," Yates said. "You can leave her here, we'll care for her." Dillard hesitated. "And what do I owe?" Yates looked to Avenlee again. She stepped back from the horse and folded her arms. "Nothing," she said. "But you'll stay the night. No use sending a man on without supper." That evening, Dillard sat at their table, eyes darting to each of them in turn. He ate with slow gratitude, his hands shaking only a little. After the meal, he pulled a folded paper from his coat and laid it flat beside his plate. "Found this west of the ridge where the wagons used to cross. Thought it might be of use to someone." Avenlee leaned over. It was a map, worn but hand-drawn and detailed. A stage route long disused, marked with creeks and way stations. Someone had written notes in the margins, distances, watchpoints, crossings. "Why give it to us?" Yates asked. Dillard shrugged. "You've got more use for it than I do." "I've seen enough roads." In the morning, he hitched his wagon again and left with a nod, the mare grazing in the pen behind him. Juna watched from the porch, her fingers looped around Avenlee's. "He was sad," Juna said. "Some folks carry it quiet," Avenlee replied. "Doesn't mean it's not there." Later that week, the rains came, not hard but steady. The roof held, the garden drank deep. Avenlee sat by the fire mending seams while Jacob read aloud from a borrowed book. Yates carved a hook for the wall, his knife strokes even. "You ever miss Wyoming?" Jacob asked, setting the book down. Yates looked over. "Sometimes I miss the smell of sage after rain, but I don't miss the rest." Avenlee tied off her thread. "What about you, Jacob? You miss the place you came from?" The boy's eyes shifted. "I don't remember it much. Just being cold." She reached over and took his hand. "Then we'll keep you warm." Juna crawled into her lap and whispered, "Can we stay here always?" Yates set down his carving. "So long as the roof holds and the creek runs, this is home." That night, Avenlee stepped out beneath the porch eave, the rain soft on the roof above. Yates joined her, the night air damp between them. Neither spoke for a long while. "I keep thinking something will take it away," she said finally. "That it'll all vanish if I stop holding it so tight." He leaned his shoulder against the post. "It won't, not this." She looked at him, her face lit only by the lantern light through the window. "How do you know?" "Because I've lived through things that don't stay," he said. "And this feels different." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, thinner now from use. "I marked a spot," he said. "South of here, flat land, good soil, spring runs through it. Only ever passed it once, but I never forgot it." "Why'd you mark it?" "Thought maybe one day I'd stop somewhere. Couldn't picture it till now." She stepped closer. "You want to build something there?" He nodded. "With you, with the children. A place that's ours from the ground up." Her hand found his, fingers twining. "Then let's plant something that won't need fences." By midsummer, they'd packed the wagon with care, blankets, books, seeds tucked into folded linen. Jacob rode ahead on the gelding, guiding the way. Juna sat between Avenlee and Yates, her arms around a cloth doll. The mare had healed enough to come along, her gait steady now. They found the land just as he remembered it. Open, green from recent rains, the stream winding lazy through it. They pitched a canvas lean-to at first, then laid out stones. Yates carved a threshold beam. Avenlee pressed her palm into the wet clay of the hearth wall. The cabin rose around them, piece by piece. They slept under stars until the roof was done, and then beneath it with the windows open to the breeze. Jacob planted corn that took root fast and sure. Juna sang to the hens each morning while Avenlee fed them. Yates built a chair that fit the bend of her back just right. One still evening, with the children asleep and the fields humming with summer insects, Yates took her hand and led her barefoot into the grass. "You never said yes," he said. "I never said no," she replied. He placed something cool and familiar in her palm, the bone ring, worn now but strong. "This still yours?" he asked. She slid it back onto her finger. "It never left," he kissed her then. Not hurried, not uncertain, just steady like the land beneath them, and she kissed him back, arms around his neck, the years behind them folding quiet into the dark. They married with no preacher, no papers, only the children beside them and the wind in the cottonwoods. They built a life not from luck, but from choosing each other every day in work and word and silence, and they stayed. Through winters and planting seasons, through sickness and harvest, through loss and laughter, they stayed always.